Hey, hello everybody. We're going to try and actually get this done and do this right this time. We had some trouble with audio in the weather truck here, but just wanted to kind of give you an update on what the weather is going to be like over the next 7 to 10 days across the United States. So, again, we're entering into a very active early June pattern, but not every part of the country will see the same type of weather. So, the main story is like the split between a warming and increasingly humid central United States, unsettled storm track across the plains, pockets of flood potential from the southern high plains into the Gulf Coast and southeast, and this like cooler trough influence in the east early in the period, and then a weather shift into the Pacific Northwest. So the severe weather risk isn't locked down to one single region right now, but several regions will need to watch for recurring rounds of thunderstorms with hail, damaging wind gusts, and locally heavy rainfall. So I want to start with the immediate severe weather setup across the southern plains and high plains. For today and tonight, the most organized severe weather is going to be focused on western Texas into western Oklahoma. The SPC highlights this risk area mainly scattered severe wind gusts, some sporadic large hail. The atmosphere over West Texas is becoming, I don't know, moderately unstable with pockets of CAPE just over 2,000 joules per kilogram, where cloud breaks and surface heating can take over. Low level southeasterly flow is maintaining moisture, while southwesterly flow aloft and a weak large scale accent are helping to initiate thunderstorms from Davis Mountains kind of into the Texas panhandle. So as these storms mature, they may congeal into a cluster, and that will take away pretty much the main weather threat and then move towards western Oklahoma during the evening. The main concern, again, is damaging straight line winds from deeply mixed boundary layer, along with large hail as these storms move into better moisture and stronger instability. So farther north today, parts of northeast Colorado, northwest Kansas, and Montana could also see some isolated severe storms. See, the setup is just a little bit more scattered, but the ingredients are there for a supercell or two near the Palmer Divide and the adjacent high plains with large hail, damaging winds, and perhaps a brief tornado. In Montana, storms are moving off into the terrain may produce isolated damaging wind gusts, especially where the lower atmosphere is deeply mixed. But on Saturday, the severe weather focus shifts northward into western Nebraska and the south into southwest South Dakota. We were talking about this before. A dry line will extend from the central plains into the Nebraska panhandle, while a mid level disturbance rotates from the Rockies into the plains. Now, I know storms are expected to develop by mid afternoon as inhibition erodes. The best forcing appears to be further northwest. So western Nebraska into southwest South Dakota. I think those are the primary areas for organized severe storms. Again, the primary threats will be large hail and damaging wind gusts. There's a low probability of tornado that exists, but you can't rule it out, especially, high unless moisture return ends up being stronger than is actually currently expected. So from Kansas southward into West Texas on Saturday, isolated storm development is possible along that weaker dry line that's going to be there. The coverage may be limited by weaker convergence and like just a shallow moisture mixing out ahead of the boundary. Even so, strong surface heating and 30 to 40 knots of a mid-level flow could allow a supercell or two to form. Any storm that can remain discrete early could produce hail, locally damaging winds, or maybe even spin up a tornado. So, we're talking about later Saturday into early Sunday. Parts of eastern Kansas and western Missouri may also see elevated storms capable of hail. By Sunday evening, the risk becomes broader and more uncertain from the northern plains through the Missouri Valley and towards the Ozarks. A frontal zone should extend south of that boundary, and dew points in the upper 60s to lower 70s will support like moderate to strong instability. However, building heights aloft may suppress or limit storm development, which really means to us that the main threat is going to be large hail and damaging winds. There is a possibility that there could be an effective shear of around 25 to 30 knots that could support some multi cells or a few rotating updrafts. But in West Texas into Western Oklahoma, they may also see some storms on Sunday, but it's just a weak mid-level flow suggesting quicker storm mergers and a tendency towards less organized mesoscale convective system. Really looking beyond that because of where we're at in the year, beginning Monday, the Weather Prediction Center expects an amplified upper air pattern as a trough digs along the east coast, while a closed mid-level low sits over the Rockies and the Northwest. The western low should drift into the southern Canada, while the eastern trough drops into reinforcement from the shortwave energy dropping out of eastern Canada by the middle and later parts of next week. So more zonal flows will be possible as they develop across the northern tier as the western system departs. And that matters because troughing over the intermountain west and the decaying surface low will promote scattered showers and thunderstorms across the central United States next week. Some of these storms over the high plains may produce isolated flash flooding around Tuesday, especially where storms and train like repeatedly develop over the same corridor. The WPC has reflected this in a written marginal risk of excessive rainfall, meaning at least a 5% chance of rainfall exceeding flash flood guidance within 25 miles of a point. So the southern high plains, including eastern New Mexico, West Texas, the Texas Panhandle, western Oklahoma, and adjacent portions of Kansas and Colorado, will need to watch this setup closely. It's not necessarily a classic widespread flood event, but it is kind of a pattern where we look where slow-moving storms, localized cell mergers, and high rainfall rates can create a rapid runoff in poor drainage areas, low water crossings, and urban corridors. The Gulf Coast and Southeast are also in the watch zone for heavy rainfall potential. A plume of tropical moisture may impact portions of the Gulf Coast late week next week, but there's still uncertainty as to where that maximum rainfall footprint could set up. The broader signal from the Climate Prediction Center favors above normal precipitation from New Mexico and Texas eastwards towards Georgia and Florida during the next 6 to 10 day period. But again, this is that time of year where we just don't really know what to expect. The weather could be very volatile. A lot could happen, and or nothing could happen. So the recent wetness is also already noticeable across South Texas, the Gulf Coast, and the lower Mississippi Valley, where the 30-day precipitation has been around 200 to 400% more normal in many areas. And that means soil moisture there is already high, and any additional rounds of rain could be more efficient at producing runoff. So, that said, from the central and northern plains, including the Dakotas, Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, next week features growing warm season pattern, which early in the period, the severe risk comes from the individual disturbances crossing the plains. By the 6 to 10 day window, a strengthening ridge over the northern central United States becomes a major player. Still uncertain, but the Climate Prediction Center expects 500 millibar heights to become strongly above normal over the Mississippi River Valley and the Great Lakes towards St. Louis. So that's going to favor above abnormal temperatures across the central and northern Great Plains in the Midwest. The northern edge of that ridge may become a preferred corridor for nocturnal thunderstorm complexes known as mesoscale convective systems. These can ridge along the instability gradient and produce damaging winds, hail, heavy rainfall, especially overnight. In the Midwest and Great Lakes, including Wisconsin, welcome home, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana, Ohio, and surrounding areas, temperatures are going to trend warmer than normal. Big bummer. Early on, the East Coast trough may keep temperatures somewhat moderate, but by later next week, the central ridge is going to expand and warmer air is going to return. Rainfall signals are mixed across parts of the Midwest, but areas closer to the plains and lower Mississippi Valley have better chances for above normal precipitation. Wisconsin and Michigan are going to be warmer than normal, which is not what I like to hear when it comes to precipitation and temperature, while Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, and surrounding areas are going to be a little bit more lean when it comes to being wetter. So the northern and mid-Atlantic begin to produce and influence the troughing that supports slightly below average temperatures at first along the unsettled condition in spots, especially where the coastal or upper level energies are enhanced by showers. But by midweek, that trough pulls away and more seasonal to warmer air returns by the 6 to 10 day period, and the Climate Prediction Center favors above normal temperatures across much of the Northwest and the Mid Atlantic, while precipitation generally leans closer to normal for many areas. Maine is one exception in the 6 to 10 day outlook, where above normal precipitation is favored. On the west, Pacific Northwest becomes one of the more interesting areas, with a 6 to 10 day outlook showing a shift towards cooler and wetter conditions for western Washington and parts of northeastern Oregon as an amplified trough moves inland. This is a notable change compared to much of the rest of the country, where above normal temperatures are favored farther across central California, Nevada, Utah, and portions of the Southwest. The signal is generally warmer than normal, with below normal precipitation favored in many western areas outside of the active southern stream zone. New Mexico is an important exception, with above normal precipitation favored due to the active southern stream and nearby thunderstorm potential. So that is what we've got for the weather for the next few days. Thanks for tuning in, and we will try and keep you updated as things move along. Have a wonderful rest of your day.